going to give everyone just a moment to get settled. And I look very forward to introducing you to this panel, to this initiative, and the wonderful representatives of the global women community that I have with us this evening. Assalamu alaikum. Greetings to everybody who is dialing in. So welcome to the Think Tech virtual meetups for the summer season. It's an initiative organized by the Saudi Ministry of Communications and Information Technology. Think Tech aims to create a stimulating digital environment and to spread digital awareness about emerging technologies. In this optic, we are happy to introduce you tonight to a series of meetups that are focused on emerging technologies. And tonight in particular, dialing in from all over the world, we are focused on the empowerment of women in the technology sector and digital innovation. I would like to begin by welcoming our panelists and experts with us this evening. We have tonight with us May-Britt, who's dialing in from Copenhagen, Denmark. And May-Britt is a partner at Devoteam. We have as well with us Orla, who is based in Tuscany, Italy, who is the Vice President of Alliances and Channel Tech and Cloud Systems for South Europe and EC EMEA at Oracle. And as well, we have dialing with us Princess Noura bint Mohammed Al Faisal, who is dialing in from Riyadh as founder of Adlal and Noon Jewels. Before we get into a very interesting conversation, I would like to say welcome. And I'd love to have every one of the women with us this evening share just a quick minute about themselves and the companies and organizations that you represent and really why you are excited to be with us this evening. So over to you, May, if you would like to kick us off, please.
Thank you, Lynn. I'm May-Britt Højgaard, calling in from Copenhagen, Denmark. Very excited to be here this evening to discuss an exciting topic about women in tech. I'm a partner in Devoteam. Devoteam is a consulting company. We deliver innovative technology consulting, so it's consulting and tech. It's organized as a professional service team, so being a partner means being a leader in the company. And we are represented in 18 countries with around 6,500 employees in Europe and in the Middle East. And my background is as a Master of Science in Engineering from the Technical University of Denmark. And what interests me a lot is sort of women's career in tech, women's presence in tech companies, women being part of the tech development. And I'm sure that some of the statements that will come from me today, because I'm from the Nordics, will seem as sort of luxury problems to others in the panel, but I'm sure that there'll be learning from all of us to the others. So I'm looking very much forward to this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, May-Britt, and it's lovely to have you with us this evening. Orla, if you would like to introduce yourself to everybody that's dialing in this evening.
So, ciao everyone. My name is Orla, and I'm Vice President for our partner ecosystem for East Central Europe, Middle East and Africa, and Southern Europe. And I'm based just outside of Florence, about 10 minutes from where Leonardo da Vinci was born. So in a very beautiful part of the country. My passion is actually literature and music. I'm actually a language graduate. I'm also incredibly passionate about shoes that I think every woman in Oracle knows about. And I share that passion, I'm sure, with many panelists and many people on the phone this evening. And, you know, my motto is actually I use a phrase from an Irish playwright, which is walk on air against your better judgment. If you can think it, if you can envision it, why not go for it? You may not always reach your goals, but you'll certainly learn a huge amount along the way. So start by empowering yourselves. Make sure you surround yourself with many good cheerleaders. And I think this evening we'll have a wonderful discussion about that and about empowering one another as we go. I have the honor of working for a company that is highly diverse in terms of the cultures that work together on teams, in terms of the gender, in terms of people's beliefs. And I truly believe that that kind of diversity makes us better, makes us stronger, and allows us to really deliver huge value to our customers all over the world. So it's an absolute honor to be with you all here this evening and with this very esteemed panel. So look forward to the dialogue.
Thank you so much, Orla. It's wonderful to have you with us as well. And Princess Noura, I know you're dialing in from Riyadh. We'd love to hear a bit about you and Azlal.
So I'm a designer by trade, a jewelry designer. And a few years ago, I realized that I really wanted to focus my effort and time on the development of the infrastructure and the design sector in Saudi Arabia. This is obviously a very big job. I don't intend to do it alone, but it's such a rewarding in terms of really focusing on developing this field. We have so much talent. We have such a young generation that is full of, I don't know, optimism and trying to co-create this sector with them has been a joy. Obviously, when you're talking about design and anything to do with design, the digital kind of world walks hand in hand with that. It's you know, part and parcel of basically everything that goes with design nowadays, in terms of applications, 3D printing, AI, all of these different things that are all connected with it. So it's very, very much exactly kind of what we do with it. And there's also this this ability now to really get into the fabric of society and be able to touch everyone in there, be they male or female. There's really an opportunity to empower women through all of these opportunities that they now have. And it's my focus in particular to make sure that we're reaching them, to make sure that we're allowing them to upskill, that we're allowing them to really participate in the development of their own economy, of their own country, and developing this market, and really affecting all the changes that need to happen. And for me, the way to do it would be through using the digital world.
Thank you so much, Princess Noura. And once again, would like to say assalamu alaikum to all of our viewers who are dialing in on Twitter and who are viewing us live on YouTube this evening. My name is Lynn Zovigian, and I will be your moderator for this session today. I am actually dialing in from Beirut, Lebanon, just less than a kilometer away from the port of Beirut, that has been an incredible arena for emergency response that required digitalization if we were going to be able to move with the agility and the necessary resources that were required in these most exceptional times. I am delighted to be hosting these three extraordinary women voices and leaders, and will really be coming in from a background of data science and research, peace building, and business building. And the intersection between all of them can most easily be met when we bring digitalization, not as an end, but as a means. And on that note, I'm delighted to begin with our first question for this evening. Let's begin by defining our terms. This is something that I always tell my R&D team. If we're going to start to talk about data, let's first begin by understanding the lexicon with which we are speaking. Oftentimes we use the same words, but we find that we don't speak the same language. So let's begin by defining digital innovation. What does it mean and how does it apply? What does it look like, be it in economies, in governments, in business, and in society? May-Britt, if you'd like to kick this off for us.
Yes, so what does digital innovation mean? We have used this term for, I think, just a few years now, actually. I mean, so intensively as we do it now. And in my world, digital innovation relates to companies and organizations. I think we could see it broader also, but I see it very often used in relation to companies and organizations. And how they, at a pace that we have never seen before, can change the way they work and the way they deliver products and services to their clients. And so digital innovation is also about disrupting business models. And we hear a lot about Uber, Airbnb, Amazon, companies that are role models in this area. And it's also about certain technologies, robotics, automation, artificial intelligence, data analytics, Internet of Things, cloud, and so on, that can enable the digital innovation. And finally, it's also about ways of working in an agile mode instead of a more linear mode. In order to respond to the requirements of the market, time to market, and also acknowledge the fact that it is impossible to predict things too far ahead. So that is sort of the corporate term of digital innovation. I think also, I mean, if we take the term literally, digital innovation must also have to do with how it affects individuals, how digital affects individuals, family members, citizens, employees, and so on. So sort of a more private term. I think it can also be interpreted in this way. So yeah, that's at least one way of seeing digital innovation.
No, that's extremely helpful because there's a lot of versatility in what digital innovation means, and it becomes context-based. It becomes who are the stakeholders, who's the consumer, who's the content provider, who is the service provider. Orla, tell us from your perspective, how do you go about defining digital innovation in the context of Oracle with your different partner teams?
Yeah, well, it's such a used word these days, digital innovation. And I actually wrote an article not so long ago on going back to where the word innovation came from. And innovation, actually, being a language graduate, I would do that, of course. It comes from the Latin meaning in novus, into the new. So building new things. And it was actually created around the time when you had the Renaissance going on. So you had Christopher Columbus discovering new territories. You had Galileo figuring out that, the earth moved around the sun. So lots of new things going on. And so for me, digital innovation, when I see how technology is applied, it's about, I guess, human beings, whether it's governments or whether it's individuals or whether it's our societies at large, leveraging technology to do new things, to push the bar, to move the boundaries. And we see that in so many different ways. And a government might do it to enhance the engagement they have with their citizens, right? I mean, even in Saudi, it's wonderful to see all of the innovation that the ministries are using. And okay, it's not a favorite example, but I think it's one we can all relate to. Every tax office around the world is using technology to crunch the numbers faster, to find out how much citizens owe and how much to get paid faster, right? And even the Zakati portal in Saudi is using technology, again, not only to collect, but also to distribute faster. So these are ways where essentially all of those activities that we as societies or human beings want to do, we're finding a way to do it maybe faster, in a more agile way, in a more, breaking down also some of the barriers, right? With a mobile phone, I'm able to perhaps sell what I build or what I make all over the world. I'm no longer constrained by physical boundaries. So I really think digital innovation is about almost the art of the possible that a human being can conceive as an idea, and finding the route via technology to deliver that to the world.
Thank you so much. I mean, again, really, from when I think about digital innovation, I think about the immeasurability of the impact that comes with digital innovation, and innovation of so many kinds. Sometimes digital innovation is viewed as the end result, but increasingly it's become the facilitating, the enabler for that crosses all industries and certainly crosses all borders. I loved the example that you gave, and I wanted to bring up that Orla lives just 10 minutes away from Leonardo da Vinci's hometown, and that was innovation in that time. And so really, thank you so much for that wonderful definition. This really leads well to our next question. How can digital and innovation fields enable women? What does this empowerment look like? And how can it be measured? Princess Noura, we'd love to hear from you, especially from a Saudi context, related to not just women at a global level.
So one of my favorite examples is Abshir. Now, I know it's really not popular internationally. There's been a lot of noise made about it. But the reality is that when the government implemented Abshir, it allowed us as women to be able to take control of all of our dealings with government entities, starting a business, applying for passports and visas, so it gave us the ability to remove that, and I mean this literally, middleman, who would have to go and do these things for us. We would have to go through a male in order to do these things. And this was absolutely the most freeing thing. It was so empowering. And the way the government gave us that power to control our own lives was huge. It was extremely revolutionary. It's unfortunate that a lot of people outside the country do not understand the relevance of this. Of course, there have been many innovations since. We're kind of, I mean, for us, technology, the ability to control our future, the ability to take care of our own things, the ability to just do simple things, day-to-day life by ourselves on our own is mind-blowing. And the way that the government through Vision 2030 has implemented many different things has allowed us to be able to do all of this. I think it's made this kind of really primal shift between one generation and another. I mean, the world I grew up in is not the world that I see now. The ability, the things that I can do, the things that my nieces are going to be able to do are absolutely mind-blowing. I'm so excited for their future, to be honest. And this is one example. I mean, Abshir is simply one example of one of the things that have been done through technology. We're lucky in Saudi Arabia in as much as we really do have equal access between men and women in terms of access to mobile phones, access to the internet, access to all of these things. Women tend to be, for us, the major consumers of technology and things like that. But I think the trick for us, or the goal for us, is going to be taking them from being the major consumers and then turning them into the people who are developing the technology, the people who are creating the technology, and just really empowering them in that way. And that, I think, is, it's more to do with a cultural kind of push and just a kind of spreading the word, encouragement as well at a at a school level, at an educational level. But I mean, I could talk about this for hours, you know, and I'm going to go on for hours. So I think I've answered the question, I think, Lynn.
Thank you so much. No, you more than have, and it's a very unique example, because Saudi Arabia as a kingdom and as a government has truly invested with very generous national expenditure, national budgets into government services that are now increasingly all digitalized. Princess Noura and I have remarked very recently when we were doing some research together, and we recognized that today digitalization through e-government has taught even some of the oldest citizens of the country how to pick up their mobile phone and do what needs to be done to have access to those rights and services. Please.
Can I just give an example? There's a lady called Ahmed, and she's and I speak from my experience in the design industry. She's very, very famous in the design field. She does the most incredible beadwork. She works with her granddaughter, and she has her own Instagram. She completely is selling and dealing with people through Instagram accounts. I mean, social media has allowed so many older women, craftspeople, to just allow them to have a business and to make a living and to reach their clients in a way that they couldn't have before. And I remember when and I use Instagram as an example because it's very popular here. But when it first came out, I mean, I could not believe how many people were using it for sales, just adapting this application and using it in a way that it hadn't been designed for, and really creating a career out of it. It's quite impressive.
So I'd love to hear from Maybrit and Orla from this, corporate and service-based perspective. What does empowerment look like? It's such a big word. It can mean so many things. How would you break it down for us in the context of enabling and women as stakeholders, and how do we move from just thinking about women in this sort of broad category to really beginning to actually deeply listen and understand that we have multiple typologies of different types of women who will have different needs and different uses for digitalization today?
Oh, it's a big question, and it's probably a multifaceted answer. But I think, one of the things that is probably very important, and again, the younger age groups gravitate toward technology almost by osmosis, right? Very, very easily. They don't see it as a barrier, they see it as an enabler, almost instinctively. I think for slightly older generations, it's really important to make sure that the gap, the digital divide doesn't get any bigger, but that actually we ensure there are programs, there are ways to actually break down that fear of technology and show them just how it can be transformative in terms of perhaps their businesses or even indeed within their lives. And, it's a challenge within the corporate world. We're constantly looking at how do we encourage more women into the industry? And of course, it's too late to think about that when they're coming out the other side of school and university. You really need to start thinking about this when, kids are in middle school and trying to get young people excited about technology or engineering or mathematics. And they may not seem like exciting subjects, but of course, technology and the speed at which it is, invading and pervading all of our lives means that this is really where a lot of the groundbreaking work is being done. And I think we need to encourage, maybe demystify a little bit technology for people and help them understand that actually it opens a vista to many, many opportunities for them. So probably some work to be done at the governmental level, the schools level. You have a lot of big companies that are very willing to do public-private partnerships and engage to kind of, because at the end of the day, it takes a village, it takes a collective to actually drive that kind of change.
No, absolutely. Essentially, almost, really creating digital communities, quite literally, in the very literal, digital citizens, in the very literal sense of the word. Maybrit, we'd love to hear your perspective here.
Yes, I was just thinking that perhaps my stories are not as interesting as yours in this field, but then when I thought a little more, then I think it's probably the same. I will also go to schools and the learning environment and digital learning tools. I think that we also see that in Scandinavia, that it perhaps stimulates girls to become more interested in tech, because that is also an issue in my part of the world. Not enough girls going forward to the scientific education. So I think that's probably an area for enablement, and also the stimulation of small businesses and new structures for partnerships and decision making and so on. I think that can also enable women. That the arena is more open than it used to be. So I think probably I see the same things as we do, and I think that's quite interesting.
Absolutely. I'd love to offer a quick live example of something that our R&D team at the Zovian Partnership is preparing for. We take care of the national pilot for developmental housing in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And we're now in this very unique situation of COVID, where it is so difficult to be on the ground with the rural communities and semi-nomadic tribes that we need to serve, and we need to bring them in and integrate them into this housing program. And so one of the things that we're really focused on right now, and we're really studying, is how can our research design be enabled by digitalization? How can we make sure that if we choose digitalization as a means of access to these communities. We, by the way, organized with the Ministry of Communications and Information Technology, our host for this evening, to have 2 telecommunications towers erected in the desert, so that these communities would have access to high quality 3G and much stronger phone lines and means of communications. And so now we're thinking, well, if we're going to go with a digital option, if we're going to be making those phone calls, if we're going to be receiving data from them through WhatsApp and very simple digital solutions, because we're not going to get to use Zoom, we're not going to get to use Skype and other means that we're using at the table this evening, is to make sure nobody gets excluded. In other words, if we're choosing to opt in for digitalization, how do we listen to our communities, in this case, women, to make sure that we don't exclude them in the process of trying to include them? And I'd love to tackle that more in our next question, which is, digitalization can enable women, but frankly, how can women enable digitalization of governments, of economies, of businesses, and of society? I'd love to hear from all of you.
If I may.
Please.
I think the simplest and clearest way for that would be for women to take part in the digitalization and creating the different programs, the apps, the uses, because then that ensures that they are creating platforms and so on that are addressing their unique issues. So it's literally, they need to engage. And as we had already spoken about before, this needs to start young in the education. We're quite lucky in Saudi in terms of the fact that many of our women for a few years now, even before Vision 2030, were really leaning towards these fields. Our issue was mostly not about them graduating, but it was finding jobs after they graduated. The government has tackled that by really creating all of these measures and these point systems by which they're really promoting the hiring of women. So they're trying to tackle that as much as possible. But I think we really, as a community, we really have to ensure that women's voices are being heard in the development phase more than anything. And that's really the most obvious solution, shall I say.
Maybe just to add to that, I think that's absolutely key, and we need to, I guess, ensure that women, and this, I don't think it's unique to Saudi, I think it's a common problem around the world. Women need to feel that voice that they have, people want to hear it, and for sure other women want to hear it. And sometimes, once one person speaks up, others see, right? So in some case, we need women to have the courage to, voice their opinions, but also blaze a trail for others, because once they're part of the conversation, it's incredible how the diversity of thought actually enriches the conversation, and typically we come up with better solutions overall. So I think really encouraging women to be part of a conversation around digitization, even if they don't yet have any experience on technology, that's okay, because that's also part of the conversation and part of the challenge we're all trying to solve as a collective. I also think there's a great opportunity for women to mentor other women. So within this whole area, ensuring that we're mentoring one another, we're cheerleading on other generations of women, whether they're older or younger, it doesn't matter. That kind of encouragement to join a conversation that we're all having to do anyway is something that I believe in very strongly and would encourage others to do.
Absolutely. There is this huge opportunity to give voice and facilitate the giving of that voice. Maybrit, I know you were just jumping in to say something. Please go for it.
Yeah. I just wanted to elaborate a little on sort of why it is so important to include women in the tech development, other than it's half the talent pool in the world, and elaborate on the better products. I think it's acknowledged that when we talk about innovation, we need to be multidisciplinary, and we need to have as many views on the new stuff, on the products or the services as possible, and the result will get better. So I think that is one argument, but I think that another and equally important is that going forward, we will have more and more automated processes that are controlled and run by algorithms. And I think it is important in this development that we have the multidisciplinary and the wide approach and the inclusivity, not only women, but in general, so that we do not reproduce various biases within these algorithms. So I think it is, that will give us a democratic and a problem going forward. So I think it is very important.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but was there not an AI program that was developed that turned out to be racist?
I think there was.
There was, with the voice of a little girl. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a very scary thought. If you think that you can transfer that kind of thought process to the AI, then yes, absolutely. It's a prime example of what you were saying.
And also, unconscious bias is a big word in the Danish debate at the moment, probably also in your countries. And and if we sort of reproduce those biases into various mechanisms, I think that'll be a disaster. And it's very dangerous. It's such an interesting term because even as a woman, you can have unconscious biases towards women. It is that embedded in us, actually.
I think absolutely we all have to unlearn these processes, and it's part of that, what Orle was talking about, which is women supporting women and really giving voice to each other and really just kind of elevating each other. which is very important, absolutely.
You know, one of the things that I've learned, we actually have a female office in Riyadh, and it's really great. We've had it for many, many years there now. And I'm always bowled over by, when I get a chance to go to Riyadh and meet with my female colleagues, their perspectives on things. So their perspectives on the business. You talk to perhaps a male colleague, they'll give you one view, and often a female colleague will have a much more nuanced insight and look at things maybe from a very different perspective. So this whole thing of perspectives and managing the myriad of perspectives becomes very, very key. It's key for the technology, but it's absolutely key for business as well. And there isn't just one viewpoint in business. There are many, many viewpoints in business. And so without the female perspective, we're missing an incredibly valuable viewpoint in business, and I'm sure we're missing many business opportunities as well. And that's something that we should bear in mind. So perspectives always enrich any conversation, and often they can very much enrich a business opportunity as well.
Absolutely, absolutely, I agree.
I want to remark on, yes, please, Princess Noura, go for it.
No, I just wanted to say, I mean, as an example, so Atlal is let's say a female dominated company. And we very, very much are, you know, I don't want to say we have a feminine approach, but we do, in terms of our focus is not so much on, you know, face-to-face time and the traditional ways of working things. You know, we have a single mother who needs to be at home with their kids, especially now. We have lots of different situations, and we managed to sail through COVID. We didn't have an issue with productivity. In fact, what we had was more productivity, and it's because there's not the single-minded approach to how a business must run. And we focus on really deliverables, and we focus on making sure that everyone is supported and getting what they need. And we really have a very high focus as well on improving and upskilling our team members. And I think, you know, it's kind of disruptive in terms, because you're not really kind of doing things the way you traditionally think that they should be done. But if anything, it's improved our output. And that's really, you know, the end goal that you want. You want your team members to be happy. You want to feel like they're feeling supported. And you want to make sure that they're really, you know, giving everything they've got. I'm done.
Thank you. And that's a perfect leeway to our next question. But just before that, I want to give a shout out to some of our Zoom attendees who are with us, and want to make sure that my panelists with us this evening are also noting the cheerleading remarks that are being made on the chat. So really a thank you to the attendees. This is indeed a powerful discussion. The insights are rich. And I think in many ways, one of the important measures of impact from a digitalization perspective will be, when is the day going to come when we no longer even have to single out a panel for women and tech? I think that's going to be a very important indicator to assess. I want to give
another indicator, please, is when we're talking about women's empowerment, we're talking about women in general, and it's not specific to one country or another.
Indeed.
I think that Absolutely. Would be a very, very strong indicator for me as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think here really is the power of data in digitalization. How are we going to move from machine learning to deep learning? How are we going to move from just receiving the data to immersing in the data? And if we are not doing that intentionally, then digitalization will always be fantastic, but will it be extraordinary? And I think that the humanization of that digitalization, that's a lot of shins in one sentence, it is really going to importantly need to be led not just by women. That would actually be bringing in an unconscious bias, as May Britt rightly said, but really the voices that maybe haven't realized that they were voices that others were really ready to have heard. I think there is something to say about the minority complex, believing that you are not relevant, and so you actually choose to opt out of being part of that discussion. But then it comes to building, starting with education, but really shifting to mindset shift and building cultures. If we're not able to build that sense of citizenship at a digital level, it's going to take another generation or two for us to get to where we would want to be. I think what would be really interesting to talk more about is the tangibility of everything that we've said so far, because here we've really spoken about frames of mind and worldviews. And we now clearly have a lexicon between Copenhagen, Tuscany, Riyadh, and Beirut, where we're not just speaking the same words, we're clearly speaking the same language. And one of the powerful opportunities in tech diplomacy, if I may use the term, is to really take it to the next level and not stay at the level of a high-level conversation. My question for our panelists this evening is, how can we make careers at a really tangible level, really practical level? How can we make careers in tech attractive, sustainable? So it's not just a job, but it's a long-term lifestyle and choice in investing one's life in. How do we make these careers meaningful for women? To not say Saudi women, to Princess Noura's point, let's talk universally. What are examples of strong practices that have been proven to enable women to grow and prosper in the digital and tech sectors? I'd love to frankly also understand what's not working. Let's make sure we're not doing that in some of the more nascent digital economies, like in the Middle East and other parts of the world. Maybrit and Orla, you're dealing with a lot of the Europe and also global stage when it comes to tech and development. What have you seen? What have you learned, and what have you unlearned in the process?
Wow. Well, I have a team that spans about 28 countries, so and everywhere from Russia to Malaga to Riyadh to Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa. So a little all over the place. So I get to engage with women from all over the region. And look, there are a couple of things. You know, one of the things that we see is we really need to encourage people into tech, as we said. And I'm a language graduate, so I actually joined Oracle because of my language skills, nothing to do with technology skills. And it's much harder to learn a language than it is to learn some of the technical things.
BA in English literature, so there's two of us here.
There you go. And you know, these are, because they give you great foundations, right? Give you great curiosity. But I really think what coming to the tangibles, one is, first of all, making sure that women and young ladies understand that technology is not all, and the industry is not all just about the technology. We need lawyers, we need economists, we need language graduates, we need creative thinkers, we need entrepreneurs, we need a very vast type of, you know, different personalities and different skill sets within the industry. I think looking at Oracle, one of the things that we have done, looking at our own balance of diversity within the company, because I won't lie to you, I am often one of the few females in the room, and so we want to get more around the table, was to look at having a women in leadership program. So to encourage the younger generations of women coming up through the company to engage, to have mentors, to talk to one another about the challenges, and to stay the course. And these are not exclusive to women. We actually want the men to be part of the conversation as well, because you often have male managers that suddenly realize by coming to a women in leadership group that they weren't actually understanding some of the challenges that we female employees were facing. So that helps a lot. I think constantly having the conversation is very important. Where possible, maybe giving some executive sponsorship to young women who have shown talent to encourage them to keep going, because climbing the career ladder is always fraught with challenges, whether you're male or female, but encouraging women to stay the course, to not back out, perhaps because of fear, and because maybe they are different and think differently to how their male colleagues think, but that's actually enriching. That's actually a superpower. It's not necessarily, if you like, a disadvantage. And so making sure that we encourage them not to be afraid to take that next step, but actually say, take the next step. You know, what have you got to lose? And I think that can help as well, very much to encourage people to stay the course. And the last thing I would say is, you know, we often have women that go on maternity leave and they may be afraid of what's going to happen to my job while I'm gone, because things move fast in the tech industry. And so it's not so much about the legalities of it, but really, you know, am I going to get left behind by my colleagues? And so really helping women through that phase, encouraging them to enjoy the moment in their life where they have had a child, encourage them to enjoy that experience and then come back refreshed. They'll have new insight anyway with a young one in the house, and bring that to the table as well. So encouraging them to bring all of themselves to the table and not to be afraid that maternity leave has to be the end of a career. It might be a pause in a career for a few months or a year, but that they can come back and they still have a lot to contribute. And with the flexibility that we have in the industry, like Princess Noura was saying earlier, that flexibility with technology means we're now able to engage and run businesses and work in a very different way. So hopefully that will be encouragement for people listening this evening.
Absolutely. May-Britt, what are your thoughts here? And then I am going to ask Princess Noura for a Saudi women angle, but we'll get to that in just a moment.
Yeah. So just a supplement to what you are saying, Ola, I agree with. I mean, I see things the same way. And also I think we have two issues. So how do we get women into the tech sector, and how do we make them stay and have a career and get all the way to the top? So two different questions. And I think just briefly to answer the first one, I think actually it's also a question of marketing. IT and tech can sound very masculine, and if you've not been in touch with it, it can sound really boring. To me, tech is the new creative arena. And as you described, Ola, there are so many possibilities and so many interactions between very different types of people with different educations. So I think actually, I mean, I think that movement has started. I think that young people are seeing it differently than perhaps we are. So I think that will help going forward. And we actually in Denmark see more girls, young women going into the various tech or STEM educations. It's not a land, I mean, it's not huge, but we see a little movement there. And and then there is the question about progressing and making a career. It's probably not different in tech companies than in all other companies. I would say, I don't think in Denmark we would say it's harder. It's easier for women to make careers in public companies. It's harder in private companies. So I think it can actually be compared to other private companies. But there are many good examples of women that are leaders in the tech industry. Actually, it's the level below that is the real problem. And I think probably our main problem in Denmark is that we believe that we have equality. It's one of our biases. We believe we have equality. We have about 50% of the women out in the workforce. Men and women do not have equal pay, so I don't know why we believe there's equality, but I think that will be the general opinion if you ask people. And therefore, if women in the private sector do not become leaders, it must be because they are not able to, they are not clever enough, good enough, or because they do not want to. And I think that that underlying assumption or our belief that we are equal I think that is actually an obstacle for us in Denmark. I think we have a structural problem, and I think we have to solve it with structural mechanisms. And they have done that in some of the other Nordic companies. For instance, in Norway, they have a legislation that says that if you are listed on the stock exchange, then 40% of the members of your board should be women. And
that's interesting.
It's really interesting. And in Denmark, we lag behind all other Nordic countries.
Princess Nora, tell us, thank you so much, Maybrit, for that. And by the way, I am born in Norway, and I always turn to my birth country as inspiration when it comes to a lot of innovation in gender. However, I think, again, the universality of gender mainstreaming is still so far away. Princess Nora, talk to us from a Saudi perspective. What are the incentives that companies and the government of this kingdom need to be intentionally creating and communicating to entice women to join the tech and digital space?
So, first of all, I'd like to say that the issue with a difference in pays, wages is, I think that's a universality. And that's going to take a concerted effort from women all over the world to make sure that we kind of level the playing field in those terms. In terms of Saudi, there's so much that's already being done, to be honest. I'm going to share just a few statistics of things with the government, just to give you an idea. So, for example, 20% of the Shura Council, which is our parliament, are women. These are women who are appointed in those positions. Which makes it, it's a very strong statement. It's a statement that's saying that we have put these women in this place so that they can be part of the decision makers and the policy makers and actually affect changes and things. So that's, just to put it, it's 30%, it's 30 of the 150 legislative seats. Women in expert capacities are being appointed to ministerial and ambassadorial positions, which is also something that we've seen, and we're very proud of those women. Today, Saudi sits on the executive board of UNESCO and an elected seat, and on the UNESCO Intangible Cultural Heritage Committee, and also by election, it is a woman, Her Royal Highness Princess Haytham Al-Mughrin, who is actually the leader of that. And then we've also got Sarah Al-Suhaim, who is head of Tadawul, the Saudi Stock Exchange, and has been and is also the chief executive officer and board member of Al-Ahli Capital. What I'm trying to say is we're actually in a position now where the government has essentially put its money where its mouth is, right? So, these women have been appointed. If you look at the Ministry of Artificial Intelligence, there are 4 dimensions of their digital skills and development. One of them is fully dedicated to women's empowerment. So there is a lot being done in terms of, creating these women, and first of all, putting these women in these positions to make sure that they are enabling change. Second of all, making sure that the whole generation of younger women have these women to look up to. And we're breaking down this idea that you cannot get to these positions, and we're heavily promoting them. I'm not going to go into education again because that's an important part, but also these kind of campaigns and to effect cultural change are really important as well. Women are being encouraged to work, women are being encouraged to have these careers. The point system, which guarantees that they're getting jobs, where I think we need to make sure that we're continuously upskilling them, because, as things happen, you said, we make sure that they're being, what is the word? They're training themselves and enabling themselves and capacitating themselves in a way that allows them to excel. It's a culture we are creating. It's much bigger, and it's the government, it's the private sector, it's individuals, it's companies. We are creating this culture where we are absolutely making sure that this generation coming up understands if you do not succeed, it is only because you do not allow yourself to. It's in here. It is no longer out there.
In other words, with digitalization, we even the playing field, saying almost there are fewer excuses, or there are fewer expectations, there are fewer spaces for the wrong types of biases to get in the way of not just participation. I mean, again, you know, from a data science perspective, there's this whole movement right now about high participatory data. And it's something that I find so colonial, because what I care a lot more than just high participation is self-determination. There needs to be agency. The indicator is no longer enough to be at 55% of women are doing this. I don't care about the participation anymore. We want the depth, we want the co-creation, we want the voices to make it all the way to the top. And the need to evolve our indicators as women as well is also primordial for this conversation. This, I want to make sure that we are acknowledging a couple of questions that have been raised by our attendees this evening. And I'll just quickly mention both of them, recognizing also that we are just about to close. So what I'd love to do is address the two questions that I have in front of me, and then as well close with a final open-ended question for our three panelists this evening. We have Moses, who's dialed in, if I can remember, from Zimbabwe, who is asking, from an African perspective, there is really low uptake of women in STEM subjects. The tech field is also male dominated. What do you think can be the role of digital innovation to close the gap of getting young girls? And I know we've spoken so much about the executives and women in their adult careers. So this is a great question, really focusing on how to get young girls to get access to female role models and stimulate interest in tech. I'd like to begin by a short answer, Moses, which is to say, next time we're hosting a panel like this, we need more young girls to be attending. We need to be choosing, and I will be very open about this, tying it with the question that we've been asked by Ihab Tabara, who is, I believe, either in Jeddah or in Beirut. Hello to Ihab. How can we avoid unconscious bias in terms of mindset? Well, one very simple example, bringing both questions together before I give the floor to our audience, to our panelists, excuse me, is to say, if we want to have young girls have stronger access to role models, maybe we want to choose a time for a Zoom meeting that isn't at the same time as dinner time. And that could be just a very simple accidental bias that we are creating, where we've completely excluded the opportunity for young girls who actually need to get ready for bed, who will therefore not be joining and being a part of this conversation. I'd love to hear from our panelists, bridging both questions together. What are your views on closing the gap and getting young girls to have equal and fair access to female role models, and tying that with how do we deconstruct and unbundle unconscious bias?
Wow, Lynn, that's almost a panel, almost a panel in and of itself. But maybe just on the Africa question, you know, I visit the continent very regularly. Actually, we have quite a lot of women engaged in the industry. I'm always quite impressed with the balance of African women involved in the industry. We have some very big Oracle partners that are actually led by women. And we see that in Nigeria, we see that in West Africa, we see that in South Africa. So it's, I think, beginning to change. I think one of the things that I think we will see on the continent is the continent is leapfrogging a whole generation of technology, and the access to mobile phones means that a lot of young girls are beginning to learn in different ways. So role models are definitely very, very important. I think the access to technology, at least simple technology like basic mobile phones, is becoming more prevalent. And then I am more than happy to join any board or any project where we can really help develop that more. I'm happy to bring some of my African colleagues and friends to the table to help with that, because again, we said it earlier, it takes a village. We need to connect one another and try and drive the dialogue forward. So I'm more than happy to do that at any point in time. I'll leave the unconscious bias to perhaps one of my esteemed colleagues.
May-Britt, perhaps you'd like to tell us a little bit more. How do we unbundle this unconscious bias? What are you seeing working or not working in Denmark today?
Okay, so we take the unconscious bias and not the other really, really hard and important.
Go for it. Go for it, please. I would never say no to a passionate answer.
No. I mean, the girls, getting them interested, the little girls, I think it is extremely important. I do not have a short, and everybody thinks that I don't have a short answer. In my house, I do a lot to tell my daughter that math is cool. I mean, but I think there are lots of efforts, and she's studying science. Her mother's an engineer. It probably helps. I don't have a simple answer for that. But as I said earlier, I think it helps that they get in touch with tech and they play with it really early. But I mean, you do not get interested in tech just because you watch YouTube videos. So we should not sort of fall into that trap. About the unconscious bias, I think that, you know, it's an abstract word. It's hard to grasp. I think that the more examples we can give as possible, I think actually that will help some sort of transformation. For instance, I hear that a woman who wants a career, she can be defined as pushy. A man is ambitious. A woman is high-pitched. A man is, I don't know, what could you say? He's, I forgot the English word for it, but it's a different word than high-pitched, and it's a lot more positive. So I think that actually we need sort of to break down that term and make it more specific. Come with examples, because then it becomes obvious all of a sudden.
I mean, in terms of really unbundling unconscious bias, or any bias actually for that matter, I think discussion and open discussion around it is important. The more people are discussing it, the more people are giving examples, the more examples from real life that are being shared. I mean, we're in a position now in Saudi where there's so much push for hiring of women that men have started complaining that there's a bias against them in the workforce. So, you know, there's always has to be an openness, there has to be a discussion, there has to be. And in terms of getting young women interested, I think it's getting easier and easier nowadays with all the programs and everything that's out there. You know, kids are getting hooked very young, but I think there needs to be a difference between becoming addicts of social media and all of these kinds of things. You know, these areas are quite dangerous. There's a lot of bullying, there's a lot of cyberbullying, and that can be quite detrimental to young women in particular, but also to young men. I think we need to avoid, you know, it's about, again, dialogue with them and explaining to them, and there's a natural curiosity in children. And I think as long as that dialogue is there and they're curious and they're interested, and it's not this big scary thing, that it's a natural thing. I mean, for us, I think it's happening already, because in terms of career opportunities, I can't think of anything that's more fun, honestly. You know, and it's the most exciting field, and more as things develop, it is going to be the only field really that's really growing at that remarkable rate. A lot of things are going to be done by AI. A lot of things are, you know, a lot of traditional jobs are disappearing and will continue to disappear. So the option for the future in terms of career choices by default is going to have to be within the digital field, I feel. Again, that's a personal opinion.
Thank you so much. And in my final closing question for our panelists, and I know we've had some very heavy and high charged brain power questions this evening. to be very fair, it's important to acknowledge that we did no justice to not a single one of these questions, because each one could be a dedicated dialogue to foster understanding, diplomacy, and innovation in of themselves. But this is certainly the starting point and a very safe and immersive space to do so. In closing, if you had to offer, or actually let me phrase it differently, please do offer powerful words of wisdom to a fellow woman who is investing herself and looking to put herself out there in the space of digital innovation, what would you tell her?
That's a big question.
So, yeah, Princess Nora, you go first.
No, go ahead. I'd rather be last, to be honest.
So, gosh, I think there are two things. I think very important, and maybe I say this as an Irish lady that moved country, that works in a male-dominated industry all over the world. I would say, be your own role model. If there isn't one there, go and create your own role model. And the second thing I would say is sometimes fear holds us back. And this is quite a female trait, I think. And a friend of mine always says, and she's an executive coach, but she always says, do it afraid. So don't let the fear stop you. Do it afraid. And, make sure you have a mentor along the way to help you, but do it afraid, step by step. Gradually the fear subsides and you actually realize you're a whole lot more capable than you ever perhaps believed. And so that's what I would say. Do it afraid and be your own role model if there isn't one around you that you can look up to.
Very powerful. Thank you so much, Orla. May-Britt, what would you say perhaps to your daughter a few years from now as she's thinking about big decisions in terms of education and career, or a young woman whom you are supporting in your company? What would you say to her?
Okay, I mean, taking your line from the beginning, Orla, I wish I could tell her you can work in tech and still talk about shoes. But I must say, I have studied with men and I have worked with men, and I do not discuss shoes enough in that sphere at all. But if I should give a career advice, so is it to go into tech or is it to move ahead in tech? Because if I should give an advice about moving on, making a career in tech, I would say to a woman, don't fall into the service trap. I see women falling into the service trap. They provide service, input, labor to men, and they take the results and move on from there. And I think they are much better at doing that. And I would say to that woman, go for the customers. I mean, the power in the type of company that I'm in is sort of owning the companies, because then you own the numbers, you own the account, you own the sales and everything. And that is being noticed, and that is the way to get the career. And I don't see women doing that in the same extent as men do it.
That's very interesting. Actually, I never thought of it that way, but now that you've mentioned it, actually, yes, I do see that quite a lot. My first thing, there's two things that I would say, and I would say this to women in general. It's not just specific to a tech field or any other field. The first one is there is no such thing as failure. Failure doesn't exist. It's just a lesson learned. It's a way of learning what doesn't work, which gets you one step closer to what does work. And it's absolutely not an excuse to give up. That's my first thing. That's kind of a motto with me in life, And I think the fear that Orlek was talking about is about the fear of failure. And if you remove the word failure from your vocabulary, it just kind of eases things. The other thing is never stop learning. Whatever field you are in, never lose curiosity and never stop learning. It is essential. The one talent, the one quality that you need to not survive, but excel in any field, in anything in life, is the ability to always be curious and the ability to always be learning. The second you sort of sit back and think, right, I know this, that's when you lose everything. That's when you get this kind of idea. You have to always be curious. And there's a joy in that, and there's a pleasure in that, and you need that in whatever field you're in. You need to be experiencing that, and that's my 2 cents.
Thank you so much. I'd love to actually put myself on the spot. It's only fair, given I made it a requirement for our panelists this evening. And I would say, oftentimes this male-dominated environment, all of these big words come with the assumption of a lot of risk, that you might lose yourself in the process. What I would say is, don't think that risk is negative, toxic, or irresponsible. It's actually quite magical, especially when you get to take ownership of it. Take ownership of taking the risk on yourself to be that incredible version of yourself that you have yet to meet. You haven't met that version of yourself yet. So take every moment that appears like an inflection point, and instead of saying, I'm not going to do that, just put yourself, build that imaginative capacity to say, who could I become if I open that door? And I think in the world of digitalization, women, tech, not just a job, but a career, not just roles of responsibility and authority, but real leadership that emanates. That is what it's going to take in order to become that incredible version of yourself that you have yet to meet. And I'd really like to close by saying thank you to the 3 incredible women that I had truly the honor and the privilege of hosting this evening. I personally learned so much from you this evening. Thank you so much. I'm so glad that this video is going to stay on the digital space, hopefully for many years to come, and will hopefully one day be redundant, so that we can make sure that those young women and those executive women, right, actually do get to view this video after this evening. It is our responsibility as panelists to make sure that it gets spread loud and clear. And we ask that the Ministry of Communications and Information Technology and the Think Tech team do exactly the same. Thank you to all of our attendees. Your questions and your comments and your encouragement in the chat this evening were very, very encouraging. Thank you very much for that. Allah ya'tikum alf afia, at a time where it's so important to be safe and healthy and put ourselves first. I want to close by saying thank you to all. Please do stay safe and have a wonderful rest of evening. Thank you again.
Thank you, ladies. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good night.